Alright, hey folks, everything new on the sun. Alright, well, I just did this whole video, but the video got corrupted or something. So, it's okay. We're going to take a look at two articles that appear that are great examples of the world turning away from God, turning to other gods, worshiping other gods, and generally moral decline in society, and a massive shift away from God. JewsNews.co.il, Pope Francis prays toward Mecca, states Islam is a religion of peace. Europe should open borders to Muslims. Because he has no idea what's happening in Germany with the chastity pants, with the anti-rape pants that they're selling to women in Germany. He has no idea what's happening with the influx of child marriage in the European countries, apparently. And they should allow more. The problem is that if you have more Muslim immigration, they just overwhelm the culture. They overwhelm the society, and that's what's happening. Sure, I've got no problem with a few migrants migrating, assimilating, getting to know the culture, getting to know the language. But when you have mass migration, you have cultural clashes. You have significant political, geopolitical change, and that's what's happening. Well, Pope Francis here basically is slapping God in the face, praying effectively, giving credence to Allah, and Allah, the God of the Quran, is not the God of the Bible. Allah is a fake God. Allah doesn't exist, and Allah is theologically completely different from the God of the Bible. When Pope Francis visited Turkey in 2014, he prayed in Istanbul's Blue Mosque towards Mecca and stated it would be wrong to equate Islam with violence. Fanaticism and fundamentalism, as well as irrational fears which foster misunderstanding and discrimination, need to be countered by the solidarity of all believers. It doesn't necessarily. And all believers don't believe the same God. I think Pope Francis needs to come out and confirm that the God of the Bible is not the God of the Quran. But I think he actually thinks they are the same God. This is bad. This, like I said, this is a slap in the face to God. I was reading other articles today which were just so disgusting I couldn't even make a video about them. But the moral decay, the turning away from God in these last days is accelerating. The other article I want to take a look at is somewhat related. Sweden has legalized child marriages for Muslim refugees who come from countries where Sharia law was the law of the land. But what about the law of the land of Sweden? Don't the laws of the land, aren't the laws of the land of Sweden enforced? Well, no. In this case, they've basically allowed Muslims who have underage child brides to keep their brides, citing humanitarian issues, i.e., they don't want to fight with the Muslims. They want to. They don't want to stir up anything, basically, and they don't want to apply their own laws of Sweden. So what are they going to do? They're going to allow the child brides. They are. Two juvenile immigrants in Karlskrona were reported to be staying with their husbands. Neither of the girls was separated from their adult men, even though minors are not allowed to tie the knot in Sweden. Now it goes on. I'm going to put both the articles in the description. You can read them. But they go on to say, we do not accept or condone child marriages, but law also states that individual trials should be conducted. So even though there's a law directly against this, they're not. They're going to, I guess, individually try these, which is going to take huge amounts of taxpayer dollars for one, and two, it should be a no-brainer. This should not be accepted if that's what their law is. Ultimately, there's the slippery slope is that, and people who say there's no slippery slope are have their eyes closed, have their hands over their eyes and their hands over their ears. They're not paying attention to what's happening. Look at the last 2 years, last 6 months even, and you can see an absolute slippery slope. What's going to happen here is they're going to allow child marriages. And then they're going to realize, oh, that's discriminatory against native Swedish civilians. And so they will open up the law and say, okay, well, native Swedish men can have child marriages. Because it's discriminatory otherwise. You can't let one particular minority do this and not allow another group of people do this. So they're going to open it up, and basically their laws are going to be completely changed because they're bending over backwards for the Muslims who are coming with child brides. And this is going to lead to the absolute downfall of society, the moral collapse of Sweden and Europe in general. Like again, what has happened in Germany. You have all these rapes happening, and the world media isn't really reporting this stuff. The world media isn't really reporting that they're selling anti-rape pants to all the women in Germany, and they're selling like hotcakes because they're so worried about rape, and there's so many rapes happening because of all the migrants. You just cannot have so many migrants flooding into a completely different culture, completely different civilization, and not expect there to be massive trouble with crime, poverty, and all sorts of other things, which these people are bringing over from their original countries. And so it just does not work. A few at a time to assimilate, that works, but you can't do huge amounts. At present, Swedish legislation on child marriages seems to be applied differently in different municipalities. So they're not even applying the laws evenly across the board. It goes on. It's just disgusting, to be honest with you, and it's a problem. And the Swedes are getting run over, and their law will effectively be changed over to Sharia law. And Muslims, wherever they are continue to push for more and more Sharia law. You see that happening in pretty much every country. The Muslims will vote for and protest for and lobby for more Sharia law in whatever country that they're in. This is just what happens. This is just what they do. It's the same thing that Christians would do. If mass migrants of Christians moved from the United States over to Saudi Arabia, they would attempt to change the country over, to a more Christian nation. It's the same thing. There's no difference, except that Christians aren't moving to Muslim countries. It's the Muslims that are moving to Christian countries. And so it's a no-brainer that it's happening. It shouldn't, like I say, it shouldn't be something that's surprising to anybody. But these countries need to recognize that, well, this is happening, and this is going to be the end result is that they're the Muslims, who are very loud, who are very much more vocal than Christians generally, are going to have their way eventually. They're going to outnumber in terms of births and babies born. Eventually, the population of them is going to increase to a point where they will effectively have the voting power to take over and to switch all the laws to match more of their home countries. And I mean, that's just the truth. That's where things are going. That's where the statistics confirm that things are going. That's where everyday news like this confirms that it's going. This is where it's going. And they're overrunning Christian nations, and eventually there's not going to be any more freedom left in those countries. And that's fine. If you want to, if you're happy living in a country that's majority Muslim and majority Islamic law, that's fine. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. I have nothing wrong with Muslims or people who follow Islam, except that I believe they're following a false religion. But otherwise, I'm not going to. They make their own choices about the God or gods that they worship. If they don't recognize the true Creator God of the Bible, that's fine. But you got to recognize that you're not going to have the peace and freedom that you had in your Christian-based country anymore if they are allowed to overrun the culture and the society. And that's what they're doing everywhere. This is where it's going. Luckily, we don't have much longer to live on this world. The Lord's coming back soon. I think in a couple of years here, we're going to start the 7-year tribulation. And before then, though, it's going to get really bad. And I think like stories like this, if you were living in Sweden, what would you think about this? I think you would think we are living in the end times right now. And that's exactly where we are. It hasn't quite hit North American shores to this extent. But this is where we're headed. So the moral decline of society, the general decline, we are turning towards other gods. The Pope, the Catholic Church, he is not outspoken for Christ, for Jesus, for the God of the universe, but he is more outspoken for Allah and civil rights and political correctness and these sorts of things. I'll leave it there, guys, and I'll put the links in the description. Thanks for watching. I'll see you guys in the next video.